Om Namah Pranavartaya, Shuddha Jnanaika Nirmalaya Prasantaya, Dakshina Murtaye Namaha, Shantirnithantamadika Paramasya Shaktihi, Vairagyam Adbhutatamam Karunatu Sandra, Jnanam Nirasta Kuhanam Madhuram Chavrittam, Nrinam Nidarsanamayam Ramano Maharshihi. Pranams. So this session would be a session on the summary of the teaching points of Devi Kalottaram. I will divide this summary into 5 parts. Start with the desirable qualifications of a Jnana Abhyasi, an aspirant, and then go to the major teaching points and the clues or the tips for sadhana that are found in this Grantham, and the description of the ultimate state of a self-realized yogi, and finally the injunctions or the prohibitions. So in these 5 parts, we will see the summary. I'm not going to go in any sequence, and I will follow a general, a logical flow of the teaching and the other things also. So the first part is the desirable qualifications in an aspirant. Ishvara says, Shraddha is the most important characteristic that a person should have, naturally. And Krishna also says, Shraddhavan labhate jnanam. So Shraddha, that is sincerity, commitment, faith. And then he should be a fearless person, nirbhayaha. That is, one should have an open mind. The teachings are going to be so mind-blowing. The fundamental assumptions that one has made in life, they're all going to be shaken. So Ishvara says, have an open mind and listen to these teachings. He says, Vigata Sprihaha. There should be, there should be desirelessness in the person. You should not get attached to anything at all. And then he says you should have compassion towards all beings. And he should give up the sense of mind. Karunai manni mamatai indri, says Bhagavan in his translation. And then utsaha paraha, you should be enthusiastic. You should be ardent. And you should have a wholehearted devotion to this path. Ahimsa is another characteristic that one should have. Ahimsa towards everything, including the plant world. And samatva bhavam. So this is very important. He says, samo amitrecha mitrecha. One should have an equanimity towards a foe or a friend. Sama lohtecha kanchane. One should treat equally a piece of a mud pot, loshtam. Kanchanam is a bar of gold. One should not make any difference between these things. These are the samanya characteristics, the general characteristics. But the most important one is the control of the mind. So when this control of the mind is achieved, the progress in the spiritual path accelerates. So the ability to make the mind still will go a long way in achieving the goal. Chaladvayu samam chittam dhriyate yena nishchalam, says the Upadesham. The chittam that is moving about constantly, that should be held. Dhriyate. And make it still. If somebody can do it, he is actually very divine, says Ishvara. The ability to still the mind, he goes on to say, is the best means to rely on in this path. It is a great habit to cultivate. It is also a state of firmness, that is thairyam. Everything that is good will come about by this stillness of mind. It is the righteous duty, that is this dharma. It is a pilgrimage to all holy places. It is charity. It is tapas or austerity. All good things will follow with the ability to control the mind. So work for it. Work towards that, says Ishvara. So he says, Tasmat, because of all these reasons, Chittam sthiram kuryat. One should make the mind sthiram, steady and still. Bhagavan himself says in his translation, Chittam Siridu Asaya Samsaram. The tiny movement of the mind is enough to start off a samsaram. Nichalamai Chittam Nilai Nirka Mukti. When the mind becomes still, that itself is mukti, he says. So the most important characteristics are these. They are summed up by Ishvara. Then let's go to the teaching points. As I said, I'm not going to follow any particular order. But I would like to begin with Bhagavan's verses that Bhagavan has included in the Anubandham, the verses from Devi Kalottaram that Bhagavan has included in the Anubandham. There are two translations for one in the Nanachara Vichara Patalam, another one in Anubandham for the same verse he has given. I will begin with that. This is verse number 46. Krit Saroje Hyaham Rupa Yachitihi Nirmala Achala Ahankara Parityagat Sachitihi Mokshadayinaha. He says, consciousness that is shining as eye in the heart lotus is pure and steady. And destroying the ego which arises from this heart, that itself bestows mukti. So, one should hold on to this I sense, aham. I is the door, says Bhagavan. So, he sets the tone from this verse onwards, aham graha vidya. The clue to everything, to the sadhana, is to cling on to this aham. The real I that is behind the apparent I that we are used to. We always live with this apparent I all the time, the false I. But there is a real I behind that, and that is what is prevailing in the heart. It is consciousness. That pure I is consciousness that is residing in the heart. And whenever the mind comes out, try to destroy the mind then and there. When you do that, that itself is mukti, says Ishvara. Ahamkara parityagat sachitihi. That consciousness, mokshadayinaha, that itself bestows mukti on you. The ego, Bhagavan says, the ego survives only by lack of vichara, only by lack of attention. Inattention is the reason for all our problems. And that is the reason why the ego survives. So when you start paying attention to the conscious part of the ego, that is that I sense, which is consciousness itself, devoid of any attachment to anything, if you are able to concentrate and cling to that ego, that conscious part of the ego, then that will take you to the pure consciousness. The ego will get toppled because it is false. Basically, it is a very false entity. So it will get toppled by your constant attention to it. It has no way to move around, and it destroys itself and destroys the object that it is clinging to. Both the subject, the relative subject, and the relative object, both of them fall down, leaving the background consciousness, pure consciousness, to reveal itself. So this is the import of the verse 46. And the next verse also has been translated by him in Anubandham. Sarvopadhi vinirmuktam chidrupam yan nirantaram tat shivoham iti dhyatva sarvasaktim vivarjayet. Asakti is attachment. So Bhagavan says in his translation, and the chivam aham, that Shiva is me, shivoham bhavana, and the chivam aham yendru anbal dhyanite. This anbal is a word that he has added. Anbal dhyanite, with a lot of prema bhavam. You keep this meditation, that is, he is I can't be anything other than him. That kind of a bhavam should be developed by you. And with this, all attachments will go. He says, consciousness, bereft of all the limiting adjuncts, that is the upadhi, like body, mind, you should be bereft of all these things, and you hold on to that consciousness alone, pure consciousness alone. So this is very similar to the Upadesha Saram verse, where Bhagavan says, Bheda Bhavanat Soham iti asau Bhavana Abhida Pavani Mata. Abhida Bhavam, Abhinna Bhavam, or Ananya Bhavam. So he and I, we are one. There is no difference. There is no barrier between you and I. That kind of a bhavanam is very, very important, he says. Is a meditation technique that Ishvara is suggesting. And then he goes on to say, Nivrittaha Vishayajnanat Nishkalajnana Tatparaha. Withdraw attention from all the Vishayajnanam or objective consciousness. Bhagavan translates this as Vishayajnanam poi Viri Nishkalamai Vishayamil Jnanam Uttridal. Vishayam illada Jnanam Uttridal. This is the technique to be followed. Withdraw attention. Like what he says in the Upadeshasaram verse again, Drishyavaritam Chittam. Withdraw attention from all Drishyam, all objects. When this mind is withdrawn from them, Atmanas Chitva Darshanam, what is there in the mind, the light that illumines the mind, hold on to that. That itself is Tattva Darshanam. Atmanas Chitva Darshanam, Tattva Darshanam, he says in Upadeshasaram. The same instruction is given here. He says, Nivrittaha Vishayajnanat. Aham Vritti, this I thought, is associated I. What Bhagavan calls as I thought is an I with something, some object. Aham and idam is a combination of both, is a compound mixture. Aham bodham, on the other hand, is pure I without any mixture at all. So hold on to the I sense in such a manner that the idam never develops at all. No thought processes start. There is no object to hold on to. And then there is pure aham. You hold on to that. And that kevala aham is the pure consciousness. And that itself is the final goal. So he says, Vishaya Jnanam, from there, withdraw your attention. This is the verse number 12. I'll go to verse number 14 now, where Ishvara says, this pure unassociated I, that is consciousness without any contact, any content, is called by Ishvara as Shunya Sthiti. It is Shunyam because there are no contents in that consciousness. There are no objects. You can imagine consciousness being a vessel. That vessel holds nothing at all. Only the vessel is there. Only pure consciousness should be concentrated upon. This is also the infinite void, Mahashunya Sthiti, he says. It is Purna Chit from the point of view of consciousness, and pure void, infinite void from the point of view of all the objects, the false objects that are carried by the consciousness in the general manner. So, Nirvishesha Chaitanyam, hold on to that. Aham amshena yachunyam chinmatra alokam advayam. And this is mukti bijam, he says in this verse number 14. And it is also parayoga pravartakam. All the world appearances die down. When only the pure aham is held, there is no world appearance at all. A jnani does not see the world as apart from him. He sees the world all within him, and it is not something apart from him. So, this enables one to unite with the Supreme. Parayoga pravartakam says, this shunya sthiti, hold on to the shunya sthiti. He is fond of this word shunyam. In number of verses, this shunya sthiti is mentioned, and Bhagavan also mentions in Upadeshasaram, bhava shunya sadbhava sustitihi, he says. So all the bhavas, all the concepts, they're all emptied out from the mind, and what remains in the mind when it is emptied of all these things is pure consciousness alone. So that Mahashunya Sthiti, hold on to it, he says. And in verse 25, Ishvara says, Yogam salambanam tyaktva nishprapancham vichintayet. Same thing. Nishprapancham is the disappearance of the world. It is the same as this Shunya Sthiti, where there is no world appearance at all. Yogam salambanam, because the mind always has an alambam. Alambam is a support or a prop. The mind will exist only because it has got something to hold on to. When there is nothing to hold on to, the mind itself does not rise. It subsides, as in sleep. But even in normal waking state, if it is possible to bring about a stage where the mind cannot hold on to anything, that holding on to something is salambanam. That is alambam. Niralamba yogam is what is being prescribed by Ishvara. He is giving up all props and supports and meditate without, holding on to anything like a japa, or a mantra, or a form of God. None of these things are required for you in this path. You empty everything, no prop at all, nothing to hold on to. Attempt that in the meditation, says, and this will not be a meditation actually. It will be a pure inquiry into the self. It is Atma Vichara. And in order to avert all suffering, says Ishvara, meditate on Mahashunyam. This is the 24th verse. Very similar verse. Akila kleshamume nikkuvadarku. Klesham is suffering, sorrow. Akila kleshamume nikkuvadarku. Mahashunyate leshamara chinta iyatru, says Bhagavan. For removal of all sorrows, what comes to your aid is meditation on this Mahashunya Sthiti. Nishprapancha Sthiti. They all refer to the state of pure consciousness and nothing but pure consciousness. And this develops slowly. To start with, you hold on to the conscious I sense. It is still not the final. And by keeping on, holding on to this I sense, slowly expands into a state where the consciousness is unrelated to the body or the mind. There'll be a stage where there'll be no relation to the body. The consciousness is withdrawn from the body and the mind and other things. It stands alone. That is Mahashunya Sthiti, the state of pure consciousness. So he says, if you want to avert all suffering, meditate on the Mahashunya Sthiti. This is on the verse number 24. And in verse number 26, he says, weaponize this Shunya Sthiti. He says that this itself, you can shoot down all the thoughts by remembering that Mahashunya Sthiti. Any concept, any thought that arises, shoot it down. And he calls it as Shunya Astram. Shunya Astram, weaponize it. That is, withdraw attention from everything and rest the attention on consciousness alone again. Anyatai niki ahattai kattuvathu. This is Shunya Astram. That is, anything that is other than yourself, that is completely removed. And then, and only the I is held on to. Ahattai kattuvathu. This is Shunya Astram. So, this is the verse number 26. And he goes on to say, further he elaborates upon the state of pure consciousness. He says, pure consciousness is not other than the import of the word I. The real meaning of I, that is pure consciousness. I points to that consciousness. Somehow we associate with the mind and the body, and then it becomes a compound mixture, it becomes a thought, and it starts all the processes, the world comes into being, and so on. So he says the real artham, the real meaning of aham padam is pure consciousness. It is not other than the import of I. It is non-different in all principles. But it is different from only one thing, and that one thing that it is different from is I am this body in ocean. This I am the body in ocean is totally a negation of this pure consciousness. It completely hides the consciousness. So the all-pervading reality comes when the state of pure consciousness is reached. It is there everywhere. Akila tattvattukkum abhinnamai deham aham enbadarku anyamai, says Bhagavan beautifully. Mei porulukku abhinnamana purnachit yengum ulla porul. I am just paraphrasing Bhagavan's words from that verse. Ahila tattvattukkum abhinnamai. It is there in all the principles. Nothing, there cannot be any experience without consciousness participating in it. Consciousness is the only experience. And onto that experience, we add on something. So we say that the waking state, consciousness plus wakefulness is waking state. So consciousness is a constant denominator. So he says, that's why he says, Akila tattvattukkum abhinnamai. Deham aham enbadarku anyamai. Dehoham bhavana should be given up. Mei porulukku abhinnamana purnachit. And it is the true content. It is that mei porul, he says, that purna vastu, That is Yengum Ulla Porul. It is an all-pervading Vastu. It is there everywhere. And that is the real import of I. So hold on to this I. I is your experience. Maybe it is a diluted experience of consciousness, but hold on to it. That is the only clue that is available to you. Don't leave it. And everything else is just an appearance, and this alone is the experience. Real experience is one's self-consciousness. Hold on to that. That will take you there ultimately, says Bhagavan. And then he says, the 30th verse, to reach this state, see to it that the mind has nothing to hold on to. Again, he emphasizes on that point. When you have nothing to feed the mind with, like fire without fuel, mind gets extinguished. The easiest way to extinguish the mind is to see that there's nothing fed to it. We keep on feeding our mind with all thoughts, all concepts, opinions, judgments, perceptions, sensations. Mind keeps on getting fed with all these things. Remove this fuel to the mind, then it will extinguish itself. Patru porul attral, Bhagavan's beautiful translation. Patru porul attral, paranda manamum shanti utridum, he says. When there is nothing to hold on to, then the mind that keeps on expanding, it has got no place to go because no fuel has been given to it. It has not been fed with any thoughts. Then it will extinguish itself. Shanti utridum, he says. You become peaceful. And then on the 17th verse, Ishvara says, there is absolutely no need to know anything outside of oneself. Like what Bhagavan also says. What is there to know? There's nothing need. You need not know anything other than yourself. Because in that knowledge of oneself, everything is contained. This is the natural state of being. Kevalam Nyayamityuktam Veditavyam. Nyayam is knowing the knower. Veditavyam. Knowing the knower. Nothing else is required to be known. Na kinchana. Nothing else required to be known. Just know the knower. Hold on to that. Veditaram, the one who knows, hold on to him and then become only that. And that is everything. Nothing else is needed. And then finally, he says, the natural state of pure consciousness, the jnani's experience at that time, when he reaches that pure consciousness, nothing has been created. Nothing has happened, never happened at all. I have always been this and no change in me. That is the kind of a feeling, experience that a jnani here has. And then this is what is called as Ajativadam. A jnani is able to say at that time, nothing has been created. Nothing has been destroyed. There has been no aspirant. There is no mukti. That state of purity is that hetur nasti phalam nasti nasti karma svabhavataha asadbhutam imam sarvam nasti loko na laukikaha. There is no lokam and there is no seer of this lokam. Na laukikaha. This is the same as what Gaudapada says, Ajativadam, and Bhagavan also says this. Muruganar says in one place that the only Vadam that Bhagavan adopts is Ajativadam, and for our sake he comes down and teaches other Vadam like Drishti Srishti Vadam, Srishti Drishti Vadam, but left to himself, he holds on to this truth. So he says, Hetur Nasti, Phalam Nasti. There are no actions, no results of actions. There are no theories, no concepts. No, this diverse world itself does not exist. The individual seeking moksham is not there. All are non-existent. Says this verse. Na nirodho, na chotpattihi, na baddho. There is no one bound, says Gaudapada. Na cha sadhakaha. There is no one who is an aspirant, who is trying to get all these are just our imagination. Bhagavan says that somebody is staying in a shade, pleasant shade, and he ventures to go out into the sunshine. He goes for a long distance. He's not able to bear the heat of the sun, and he tries to run back to the shade. And that is the state. That is our state. The sadhana that we are doing, is totally unnecessary creation. We vainly put on ourselves limitations. The Purna Vastu, because of some Mahashakti, because of our imagination, imagines itself to be a limited individual. And after that, it does all kinds of sadhana to overcome this unnatural imaginary limitations. And finally, when you wake up from that state, you say that I have not moved out of anything at all. Bhagavan says in Ekatma Panchakam the same thing about a dreamer. Somebody is sleeping in Ramanashramam and he has a dream. And in the dream, he dreams as though that he is going to many countries, and then a lot of difficulties he has, and with great difficulty, he finally is able to come back to his own native country, and then he comes to Ramanashramam, and he is just entering Ramanashramam in the dream world when the dreamer actually wakes up, and he has not moved an inch. He's been there all along, and all this great travels all around the world. Bahuloka Sancharikaha, says Bhagavan in his translation of Ekatma Panchakam. And this is exactly what Ajativadam is all about. Nothing has been created. It's all our imagination. Just shed this imagination. That's what Bhagavan says as the highest teaching. So this is the gist of the second part, which is the teaching point, major teaching points. Now, there are number of tips or sadhana points given by in this great Grantham. Ishvara says, Sadabhi bhuyate chittam nidraya smaranadina bodhayitva prayatnena kuryat swastham punah punaha. He says, mind loses its sharpness due to sleep and thoughts. Mind abhibhuyate, sada abhibhuyate, it keeps on losing its sharpness. Alertness is gone because of, the cycle between sleep and thinking and other things. Mind sharpness is gone. But if prayatnena, with effort, you should reach that alert state again and again and stay alert all the time. And that alert state should be devoid of thoughts. When the mind is devoid of thoughts, it decides to go to sleep. Actually, it is a defense mechanism for the mind to protect itself. The mind's defensive mechanism is either create thoughts when you want to make it still, it disturbs you by creating thoughts, or when it is not, it is suppressed too much, then along with consciousness, it subsides. That is, into sleep it goes. So either you are swinging between the sleep state or a state of, constant thinking. So the modes of the mind, Bhagavan says, are dullness, which is sleep. Engaging in scattered thinking is another mode of the mind, or indulging in reveries. So we oscillate between these all the time. We oscillate between the states of indulging in reveries or dreams, engaging in scattered thinking during the Jagrat state, or go to sleep. So never is there a chance to hold on to alert consciousness. So what is required is development of concentration. Ekagrata, chitta ekagrata is what you should develop. And then the mind has to be made steady. So he says, remember, sharpness goes by all these wanderings of the mind. When the mind becomes steady, says Ishvara again, this is in the 34th verse, do not disturb it at any cost. There are moments when the mind automatically, without any effort, becomes calm. We would have noticed it during our sadhana periods, that we were not really expecting the mind to become so calm. Suddenly it becomes calm. Maybe it is because of the efforts made a few days earlier. No effort goes waste. So the effort that was made and given up, but that results in pure moments of calmness at some other time. So the clue that is given, the tip that is given is, when the mind becomes steady, at least see to it that it is not disturbed. Do not disturb the mind when it is steady. Yada sthiram bhavet chittam Naiva chalyam kathanchana. Don't move it. See to it. So when we recognize this is a peaceful state, when there is a smallest urge to move out of that and look at something or think about something, immediately cut down, quell the thought, go back to that steady mind state. This has got to be done with effort. Prayatnena, says Ishvara. And make the mind devoid of all supports. Whatever was said earlier is being repeated here. Ashrayat alambanam chittam tadvat kuryat nirashrayam. Don't feed anything to the mind. The mind's tendency to cling to the sense objects, recognize this, and withdraw attention from objects whenever it stays. And then the question, where should the mind be kept during meditation? Where should we keep the mind? What is the bhavana of the mind? Where should it be kept? Not any location, says Ishvara. Naiva urdhvam, not up of the body. Na madhyam, the middle of the body. Na pyadhaha, not in the lower regions of the body. Antarbhava vinirmuktam sada kuryat nirashrayam. Don't have to put it in any pay attention to any part of the body. Pay attention to consciousness. The location of consciousness is called as heart, but it is not a physical location. It is the seat of consciousness. So every time you orient your attention towards this conscious self and don't try to put it in any location of the body. This is a clue that is being given by Bhagavan as well as Ishvara here, that don't do this locational meditation. It is not going to help. And then he says again, Nidrayam bodhayet chittam vikshiptam shamayet punaha. When you feel sleepy, wake yourself up. It will happen. Normally it will happen. Whenever you are intensely meditating and then keep the mind empty, we'll go to sleep. But don't. Whenever you are waking up, pick up the point of vicharam again, atma vicharam again. When you are waking up, from there you start the vicharam. Over a period of time, the steadiness will be achieved. Chittam vikshuptam shamayet punaha. When the mind becomes too much of, too much wandering and then, getting engaged in the worldly affairs, vikshiptam, that is known as vikshiptam, being in the projecting mode. Shamayet punaha, bring it back again. So it is like cycling, trying to achieve balance in cycling, not this way, not that way, not on the sleep, not on, your mind identified state, but alert mind without any thoughts. That should be the goal, and that can be achieved by constant practice. When mind falls asleep, we awaken it. When wandering of mind starts, quieten it. When thought-free alertness is achieved, do not distract it. This is mind's defensive mechanism, as I said. And then he says, in the 48th verse, give up all notions, country, caste, ashrama, etc. Hold on to your swabhavam, the natural state of being consciousness. That alone you hold on to. Bhavanan yetan parityajya swabhavam bhavayet sada. Swabhavam. Tan nilayin bhavanaye patri padagu. Bhavanaiகளை agatri. Tan nilayin bhavanaye patri padagu, says Bhagavan. And then there are a few verses on how the state of self-realization will be experienced by a jnani. Ishvara says, the jnani te yanti paramam sthanam janma mrityu vivarjitam. The state that a jnani experiences is, there is no thought of death, there is no thought of having been born. He transcends both birth and death. Janma mrityu vivarjitam, that state, there will be just a thought. Death is just a thought, and being born is also just a thought, and both the thoughts are not existing in a jnani's mind. And then he says, ahameko name kaschit naham anyasya kasyachit. I alone am. That is the feeling, that is the experience. I alone am. Kevaloham. Shiva Kevaloham. No one belongs to me, I belong to no one. This is the Kaivalya Sthiti, Kevala Sthiti. The great aloneness, that is the experience. Nane Parabrahman, Nathan, Ulahuk, Ishan, all this. I am the Supreme God. That kind of an experience a jnani has. When consciousness without any thinking happens, that consciousness feels like God, says Bhagavan in one place. I am the master and lord of this universe. This is the feeling. Tada bhavati shantatma sarvato vigata. He has absolutely no attachment to anything. All desires will vanish. And there is total fulfillment. Every desire in the world, there is a feeling of having been fulfilled. There is total contentment. And he experiences perfect peace. Akayo nirguno hyatma. He is forever without form. He does not take himself to be with any form. Ashariram, akayam, all these things are mentioned about a jnani. Without any qualities. Soham asmi, I am he. That is the only feeling that has. Vijñapti matrohi, I am pure consciousness. I am awareness. I am arivu. That's the feeling. Sada vishuddha, I am immaculate, pure, blemishless. Sarvatraya, I am present everywhere. That is the feeling of a jnani. He is present everywhere, not located in any one body. Nadeya heyo heha. Heyo hi aham, he says. Nadeya means no one can grasp me and no one can leave me also. I cannot be grasped. I cannot be left. That is the feeling. Vishokaha. It's a state of sorrowlessness. Icharacharangatki ishannan. I am the Lord of all creations. Pitacha, Matacha, Pitamahascha. I am the most ancient one. I am the one who has created. I am the Pita. I am the Pitamaha. Grandfather of this entire universe. I am more ancient than the most ancient. I am more modern than the most modern. That is the feeling of a jnani. Mameva sarve paripujayanti. He says, everybody worships only me. All the worships are only to me. Not me, the person, but me, the universal consciousness. Every puja that is held is only for my sake. This vast creation is nothing but me, the infinite one. That is the feeling that the jnani has. Jnanaika rupaha. I am the transcendental knowledge. Nishprapanchaha. I don't see any world at all. There is no world around. I am alone. Anadi vijnanamayam. I am the beginningless, unborn consciousness. That is the feeling. Niranjanam. I am the blemishless one. Nishpratimam. I am formless. Adrishyam. Nobody can see me because I am formless. Agrahyam. I am not comprehensible at all. Achintyam. Nobody can comprehend me. I am beyond the mind. So this is the experience of a jnani. The final section is prohibitions, the injunctions that are given. What should not be done by a jnana abhyasi. Of course, he covers those things that are not required to be done. And of course, there are prohibitions about something that should never be attempted by any jnana abhyasi. He says there is no need to meditate on chakras, nadis, repetition of mantraksharas. All these things are of a lower order, meditations of a lower order. And a person who wants to get that nirmala jnanam, he does not have to have resort to any of these things. Doesn't have to resort to any of this. Breath retention, that is the kumbhakam, the technique of retaining the breath in order to control the mind. All these are all very violent kind of practices. Don't practice them, says Bhagavan. Ishvara and Bhagavan also. Ritual worships. Natra puja namaskaraha, he says. Pujas, namaskaras, japa, dhyana. All these things are useful in the initial stage. They will purify the mind. But once you have developed the taste for Atma Vicharam, stay in that Atma Vicharam. Meditation of the heart, meditation on the Atman, stay with that, and all other things need not be taken up at all. Because all these things are going to keep the mind alive. Japa, dhyana, all these things, puja, they will keep the mind alive, and our aim is to destroy the mind. So that's why at one point you should move smoothly from this level to the next level of doing without any kind of a mental activity. All objects of attachments called dvanda should be given up, he says. And he says a wise man should not attempt to give up the body out of aversion, should allow prarabdha to run its course. Some stage may be attained where there is a frustration about the body, holding on to the body, and then there may be a thought, why not I give up the body? Bhagavan says, don't do that, because the prarabdham should run its course on your own. You should not do anything at all. Let the body be, and then you continue with your meditative life. And he says, no need for agni karyam, like homas, yajnas, yagas. All these things are not really required. No need for pilgrimages. And there are no strict rules of conduct also. And there are no ritual baths required, ritual worships. Pitri karmas, that oblations to the ancestors, even that need not be followed up. When you are intensely concentrating on this Atma Vichara path, there is no need to do any of those other things. These things are all meant for an advanced abhyasi. We have to keep that in mind. We have to ask ourselves the question, am I doing 24-hour Atma Vicharam? If yes, then yes, these teachings will apply to us. And he says, Ishvara says, renounce all religious edicts and disciplines, caste rules, associations, give up all plans, sankalpam, vikalpam, all these things you give up. Don't make any plans. Just stay in the course of meditating on the heart. Sankalpam cha vikalpam cha. Bhagavan says, samayacharame satru minrit tellai, jati dharmam serndha sangattayum durattallu, he says. Keep away from all these associations. But the most important prohibition comes here. Palavidamam siddhikal meedu patral urugave. Don't go after this supreme powers, these supernatural powers. Don't go after them. They will mislead you and then pull you down. After having reached a very high level, you will be pulled down by your attraction towards siddhis. On their own, if they come, it's one thing. But going after them with the idea of display of these siddhis will be the biggest obstacle in your final release. Etayir nasti para muktihi, says Ishvara. In this, there is no mukti at all. Siddhis are not going to bestow mukti on you. And if your concentration is for mukti, then siddhis will not do. So keep away from the siddhis. This is the instruction given. But he says, himsa should be all forms of himsa should be given up. Even to the extent of plucking flowers for puja, you are going to cause harm to the plant. Plucking tender leaves, roots, all these things need not be done. Bhuta pidam na kurvita. Don't harm any kind of a living being. Never ever indulge in various forms of witchcraft. He calls it as Chudra karmani, na kuryate chudra karmani. Freezing one's abilities, usage of negative forces, mantras with evil purposes, all these things should be given up. Never even think about these things. Avoid unnecessary arguments and disputes. Give up words of abuse or words of praise. Kubhashita subhashitam, he says. Give up all these things. Just stay the course. You stay away from the crowds, he says also. Cultivate ekantam. Give up jealousy, slander, pomp, hatred, desire, anger, etc. All these things are negative things and they are not going to take you anywhere. So these are the prohibitions mentioned by Ishvara. So more or less, this is the basic essence of the Jnanachara Vichara Patalam. We have had a very long study of this particular text, and it has been an immense satisfaction to me, and I hope it is the same for everybody. So with this, I will conclude my lecture today.